Here's the thing about safe locations that nobody in the survival world wants to admit. They don't stay safe. They never were permanent. Every shelter, every refuge, every fortified position you've ever read about eventually failed. The people inside either left before it failed or they became part of the wreckage when it did. There is no such thing as a fixed safe location. There are only locations that are safe right now and locations where safety already expired and the people inside just haven't figured it out yet. The collapse doesn't come for you all at once. It doesn't knock on your door on day one and announce itself. It seeps in. It builds pressure, and it sends signals that most people don't recognize because they're too invested in the location they've already committed to. They've moved their supplies there. They've built their routines around it. They've told themselves, this is the place. And when the signals start appearing, they rationalize them away because leaving is psychologically harder than staying. That rationalization is what fills up the failure statistics. The survivors aren't the ones who found the perfect location. There is no perfect location. The survivors are the ones who knew when to leave an imperfect one, who read the environment the same way a sailor reads weather, not looking for storms overhead, but watching for the conditions that always precede a storm by 12 to 24 hours. The signs that something is building that you cannot see yet, but that the environment is already communicating in its own language. This is that language. Here are the 7 signs your safe location is about to turn deadly, and why the window between reading the first sign and the last chance to leave is almost always shorter than you expect. Sign 1. The traffic pattern around you changes. When you first settled your location, you made a mental note, consciously or not, of what normal looked like. How many people passed your position in a day, what direction they were moving, how they were moving, whether hurried or slow, solo or in groups, laden with supplies or empty-handed. You cataloged the baseline, even if you never called it that. Now something has shifted. More people are passing, or fewer. People are moving faster in one consistent direction, like water finding the lowest point on a slope. Groups that used to pass through your area have stopped appearing. Individuals who were moving through in 1s and 2s are now appearing in clusters of 5, 8, 10. The directionality has changed. Everyone is flowing away from something, towards something, and your location sits either in the path of that flow or has been suddenly abandoned by it. Both are danger signals. Both mean the environmental calculus around you has changed in ways you don't yet fully understand. When populations move with purpose during a collapse, it is almost always because information has traveled faster than you received it. Someone knows something. A resource has appeared or disappeared. A threat has been confirmed. A route has been closed. A conflict has moved. People vote with their feet before they use words, and a sudden change in traffic pattern is a crowd-sourced intelligence report about conditions you're not yet aware of. The common mistake here is to see increased foot traffic as a sign of activity and normalcy. It isn't. Stability looks like low, consistent foot traffic with predictable patterns. A sudden spike in movement, especially directional, purposeful movement, is the environment screaming that something upstream has changed dramatically. Decreased traffic is just as dangerous in a different way. If areas that used to have regular foot traffic go suddenly quiet, it usually means one of two things. People have learned to avoid that area for a reason, or people have been removed from that area for a reason. The first tells you there's a threat. The second tells you there may be a threat that is actively clearing the landscape. Either way, the silence is not safety. The silence is a warning. Establish your baseline in the first 48 hours at any location. Count and characterize movement, direction, group size, load, pace, time of day. Then monitor that baseline the way you monitor food and water levels as a daily operational assessment. When the pattern breaks significantly, your location's threat status has changed, whether or not anything has actually arrived at your door yet. Sign 2. Your critical resource flow is disrupted. Every location has a resource dependency. You don't need to acknowledge it for it to be true. Water from a source 400 meters north. Scavenging grounds spread across a 4-block radius. A garden plot or food cache that supplements your stores. A trading relationship with a nearby group that provides things you can't produce yourself. These dependencies create invisible supply lines, and supply lines have choke points. When the flow along those lines is disrupted, when the water source looks different, when the scavenging grounds come back empty 2 days in a row, when the neighboring group stops appearing at the agreed-upon exchange point, your location's sustainability has been silently compromised. Not announced, not attacked, just slowly cut off at the root. Most people don't register this as a threat signal. They register it as a problem to solve. They try to find alternate routes to the water. They scavenge further out. They assume the other group is just busy. They do not ask the more important question: why did the flow stop? And what does that tell me about what is happening beyond my immediate visibility? Resource flow changes for 2 reasons. Either the resource itself changed, the water source is contaminated, the scavenging area was cleaned out, the other group moved or was destroyed, or the path to the resource changed. Something between you and the resource has become dangerous enough that the flow stopped. Either answer is information about your location. If the resource is gone, your location is no longer sustainable. If the path is blocked, your location is being isolated, and isolation during during a collapse is a precursor to siege. You can only be surrounded if you stay in one place. Watch your resource dependencies as carefully as you watch your front door. The first disruption is a question. The second disruption is an answer. The third disruption is a situation you should have started leaving during the first. Sign 3. New unfamiliar faces appear near your position more than once. The first time you see an unfamiliar face in your area, it means nothing. People move. Circumstances change. A single stranger passing through is just a stranger passing through. The second time you see the same face, or a different unfamiliar face in the same general area over a 4 to 4 8-hour window, it means you're being observed. This is not paranoia. This is the operational reality of how resource acquisition happens during collapse. Groups do not attack blind. The people who survive long enough to become threats are methodical. They watch first. They identify what's worth taking. They count occupants. They assess defenses. They establish patterns. They look for the window of minimum resistance. That reconnaissance process always looks like this. Multiple passes, different distances, different angles, sometimes the same person, sometimes different members of the same group rotating through, so no single face appears too many times. They're patient because patience is cheap, and getting ambushed because you move too fast is expensive. The signal to watch for is not a single suspicious person. It's a frequency pattern. 2 or more unfamiliar faces in your operational area within a short window, especially if they appear to be lingering or observing rather than passing through with clear purpose, is reconnaissance. It means a group nearby knows you exist. It means they're deciding whether you're worth the effort. The appropriate response is not to confront them. Confrontation confirms you're there, confirms what resources you're protecting, and may accelerate a timeline that was still undecided. The appropriate response is to immediately behave as though your location is already compromised, because it probably is, and begin exit preparation while continuing to monitor. If the reconnaissance faces appear a third time, you should already be gone. Sign 4. Local noise and environmental activity drops to abnormal silence. This one is counterintuitive enough that it kills people who should know better. You've been in a location for days or weeks. The environmental baseline has animals, birds, ambient human noise from the distance, the dull murmur of a world still functioning at reduced capacity. There are sounds you've stopped consciously registering because they've become part of the wallpaper of the place. Children somewhere, dogs, wind through a particular gap in the structure, the irregular percussion of a loose piece of metal flexing in temperature changes. Then one morning, or one afternoon, or in the stillness of a 3 a.m. watch, it stops. Not reduced, stop. A sudden, abnormal drop in ambient noise is the environment's most reliable threat indicator, and most humans have been so thoroughly separated from their evolutionary heritage that they don't feel the alarm it's supposed to trigger. The biology is intact. The connection to the interpretation is broken. Your ancestors felt it as the hair rising on the back of the neck. You probably feel it as nothing, because modern life spent 50 years conditioning you to override that sensation. Stop overriding it. Birds go silent when large, ground-based threats are in the area. The specific pattern of bird alarm calls, not just absence of bird song, but the shift from normal activity to the sharp, rapid alarm calls, then complete cessation is a threat sequence that moves through a landscape like a wave, 30 seconds ahead of whatever caused it. Insects stop their chorus when temperature drops suddenly, or when barometric pressure shifts, but they also go silent under the influence of large groups moving through the area. The frogs stop. In a built environment, the abnormal silence has a different source, the absence of human-generated ambient noise. If the background level of human activity in your area drops sharply and suddenly, it means people have reason to be very quiet, or people have left very suddenly, or people have been made very quiet by something or someone. Any of these explanations is a signal that does not allow for relaxed interpretation. When the noise floor drops dramatically and unexpectedly, the correct response is to treat your location as immediately compromised and assess exit options, not after you've figured out why. Before. Sign 5. Your location has developed a reputation you didn't build. This one develops slowly and is the most dangerous for exactly that reason. In the early days at your position, you were unknown. Nobody knew you were there. Nobody knew what you had. You were an anonymous point in a chaotic landscape. That anonymity was protection. The best protection there is. Not firepower, not fortification, obscurity. Then something changed. Maybe you helped someone who asked. Maybe someone saw you moving supplies. Maybe smoke from a fire identified your cooking time. Maybe the noise traps triggered one night and you shouted when they did. Maybe the group you traded with mentioned you to someone they trusted, who mentioned you to someone they didn't. Reputation in a collapsed environment doesn't travel with polite introductions. It spreads laterally and exponentially through networks of need and desperation. The signal that your location has developed a reputation is the increase in directed approach. People who approach your position specifically, not wandering past it, but heading toward it with clear intent. Strangers who arrive and ask questions that indicate prior knowledge. How many people do you have here? Are you still trading? Someone said you might have medicine. The references to a someone who told them about you. Each of those references is a thread in a web of awareness that now surrounds your position. Here's the math that most people refuse to do. Every person who knows your location and your resources is a potential source of intelligence for a threat, not because they're malicious, many of them aren't, but because information about resources travels whether or not the person sharing it wants it to. A desperate person will trade your location for a meal without even registering that they're doing it. A frightened person will give up everything they know under pressure that doesn't require much pressure at all. When 3 or more people with no obvious connection to each other have found your location by referral, when you can trace at least 3 separate approach threads back to a web of reputation, your obscurity is gone. The core protection of your position has expired. Fortification and firepower may buy you time, but they cannot substitute for the obscurity you've already lost. Start planning your next position the day you lose your first one. The reputation signal is usually visible about 72 hours before the next step, which is a group showing up at your position that you didn't invite and didn't expect. Sign 6. Group behavior within your position changes. If you're solo, skip this one and come back to it when you aren't. If you're with people, this sign is more dangerous than any external threat and harder to see because it's generating from inside your own position. Functional groups have a particular behavioral signature. People communicate directly and frequently about shared concerns. People fulfill their roles and watch shifts without requiring enforcement. People disagree openly and resolve disagreements without splintering into factions. The internal tone is focused, pragmatic, forward-looking. People argue about what to do next. That's healthy. Conflict about tactics is the language of a group that's still operating as a unit. The danger signal isn't conflict. The danger signal is the cessation of certain kinds of conflict combined with the emergence of different ones. When people stop raising concerns about external threats and start raising concerns about each other, who's eating more, who's sleeping through their watch, who brought this person in, who made that decision, the group has rotated its threat assessment inward. This is a symptom of accumulated stress and resource scarcity, but it is also a survival signal that the group's cohesion has begun to fracture in ways that directly compromise your collective security. Fractured groups don't defend effectively. People performing security rotations with resentment don't maintain alertness. People who are quietly calculating whether they'd be better off with a different arrangement are half positioned to leave at any moment, often with supplies that belong to everyone. People in internal conflict don't share intelligence about what they've seen and heard externally. They withhold information as leverage or because they simply stopped caring about the group's well-being above their own. Watch for the moment when your position's internal communication shifts from "we have a problem" to "you are a problem." That transition, once fully established, cannot be reversed under the pressure of a collapse environment. It can only be managed by changing either the composition of the group or the group's location. A location defended by a fractured group is not defended. The walls and the fortifications and the noise traps are irrelevant. The group itself has become the vulnerability. Sign 7. You've stopped actively assessing. This is the last sign. It's also the most common cause of everything that comes before it. There's a specific psychological state that develops in any position held for more than 2 weeks without a serious incident. It feels like adaptation. It presents as efficiency. It's actually a threat state so normalized that it's been reclassified as baseline. The brain, which cannot sustain elevated threat response indefinitely without catastrophic cognitive cost, performs a recalibration that says this environment is acceptable. And what was frightening in week 1 becomes routine in week 3 and invisible in week 5. This is not weakness. This is biology. The same neurological process that allows combat veterans to function in environments that would paralyze civilians is the same process that allows a person sitting in a compromised safe house to sleep through a threat that their week 1 self would have caught immediately. The signal isn't an external observation. It's an internal one. When was the last time you did a formal, systematic threat assessment of your position? Not a glance around. Not a feeling that things seem fine. A methodical review. What has changed about traffic patterns in the last 72 hours? What resource flows have been disrupted? What new faces have appeared in the operational area? What has changed about the ambient noise environment? Has our reputation in the surrounding area grown? Has internal group cohesion changed? Those 6 questions. Last time you asked all 6 of them with genuine rigor, what was the date? If you can't answer that quickly, you've stopped actively assessing. And when you stop actively assessing, you stop receiving the warning signals that the environment is continuously broadcasting. The signals don't stop because you stopped listening. They accumulate, they compound, and the first one that breaks through your normalized baseline is the one that arrived too late to act on. The people who die in locations that were once safe almost universally describe the same trajectory when the retrospective is available. The signs were there. They were there in week 1. They continued to develop. But the people inside had established such a thorough routine of normalcy that the signs registered as noise rather than signal until the last sign arrived, which was not a sign at all. It was the event. The discipline of active threat assessment is not a daily activity. It is a twice-daily minimum. It is the operational cost of maintaining a safe location. It is the reason some people leave before it costs them anything, and other people leave after it's cost them everything. Build the assessment into your schedule, the way you build watch rotation into your schedule. Not because you feel threatened, because that's the job of anyone who wants to keep waking up in the same position they went to sleep in. Here's the uncomfortable picture that ties all 7 signs together. The factors that make a location feel safe are almost entirely different from the factors that make a location actually safe. Comfort, familiarity, established supply lines, social cohesion within the group, the absence of incident over the preceding days, all of these feel like security. None of them are security. They are history. They tell you what has happened. They tell you nothing about what is developed. Real security is a continuous process of reading the environment and making honest assessments about whether the balance of signals still favors staying or has shifted to favor leaving. It requires emotional detachment from the location that most people cannot sustain, because location means home, and home means survival identity, and abandoning it feels like defeat. That attachment kills people. The people who make it long-term are not the people who found the best location. They're the people who understand that location is a variable, not a constant. That the value of any position is a function of current conditions, not a function of the effort they put into establishing it. That the sunk cost of supplies and time and fortifications spent on a position is not a reason to stay. It is a reason to extract as much of it as possible and move before the extraction becomes impossible. Every one of the 7 signs is readable. The traffic changes before the threat arrives. The resources dry up before the siege begins. The faces appear before the attack. The environment goes silent before the approach. The reputation spreads before the directed targeting. The group fractures before the critical security failure. The assessment stops before the accumulated signals converge into a situation that cannot be navigated. The window is always there. It is always shorter than it looks, and it always closes faster once you start negotiating with yourself about whether you really need to leave. You don't get to renegotiate when the window closes. Watch the signs. Take them seriously the first time. Treat a single disruption as a question that demands an answer, not a coincidence that can be dismissed. And when 3 or more of these 7 are active simultaneously, traffic changed, resources disrupted, unfamiliar faces appearing, environmental silence, reputation growing, group fracturing, assessment slipping, don't spend another night wondering if you're reading it correctly. The location that kept you alive last week will not automatically keep you alive next week. Safety is not a discovery. It's a maintenance discipline, and the moment you stop maintaining it, you've already begun losing it. Read the signs, move when the math says move, and be somewhere safer before the people still rationalizing why they should stay find out that they were wrong. The best survival decision you'll ever make is the one you make early enough that it looks like an overreaction, because overreactions don't leave bodies, they just leave empty rooms. Leave the empty rooms to someone else.